But Charlie Kirk, he partied with dangerous motherfuckers. He was
Yeah.
partying and hanging around genocidal billionaires, and they play for keeps, fam. If
Yeah,
you
they'll kill
cross them,
anybody, man. They'll kill
yeah,
anybody, and so I don't claim to have. Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say like Israel did it, because
yeah, I'm not there either.
we're talking about a sort of Zionist constituency that goes across borders. So it wouldn't who knows what the actual role of the Israeli state may or may not have been.
I hear you.
But the timing, it's interesting to hear people that are more conspiracy averse in some ways, like if they talk about 9/11 or other issues, like Larry Wilkerson, Larry Johnson, Max Blumenthal, and they're all really pointing out how suspicious this is. And then when you add it with the obsession with making sure that the American right stays on side as far as Zionism is concerned, and the purchase of TikTok, the turning CBS into a genocide advocacy network. I mean, these are really striking things.
Because Larry Ellison, who now owns CBS, who now owns a massive amount of the news, who has substantial power over the American public, how they think, and he's hand selecting senators. He playing a big role in the Trump administration. And I am of the belief that none of these presidents are true intellectual thinkers. They're not leaders. And I don't even believe they are directing shit. In my personal opinion, I believe every single president we had, especially at least in my lifetime, has been nothing but a puppet in the suit. Why do you guys think the United States foreign policy does not change between every single president? You have a puppet who is supposed to be the charismatic person, and they went through. Apparently, it works because they get millions, tens of millions of votes. Like white America, they love Donald Trump. He's the figurehead. Like you put some person now who's charismatic, while you have the true motherfuckers run the scene. And this may vary and differ based on who's president. For example, during George W. Bush Jr., Dick Cheney was that motherfucker. Once again, I think it's very. Dick Cheney was that motherfucker. And I think you can make the argument that he was a shadow president under George W. Bush Jr. Under Joe Biden, it was 100% Anthony Blinken. Like, Anthony Blinken was the motherfucker who was really directing shit. But overall, the goal of the United States empire will not be hijacked by one person, which is why I predicted that Donald Trump would eventually fold to the NATO proxy war. And now he's going even further than Joe Biden did, for example. And there are a lot of MAGA people who are confused by that. Meanwhile, I called it 2 years ago. There was a lot of people who was, yeah, I don't blame them. They want to be positive about the future. They say, man, we got to support Trump over Biden, Trump over Kamala, because at least he will end the Ukraine war. And whenever people say that, I'm like, man, you sweet summer child. That is not going to happen. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down, but I understand how the empire works. That is absolutely not going to happen. And I was proven correct. So that's my argument. Like, I think people like Larry Ellison, like the hardcore neocons in Donald Trump administration and the Republicans in the background, I think they're the ones who really run the show. I think with Larry Ellison with the most power because he's the most wealthy person in the world. Like people were saying he's worth more than Elon Musk. He got that shadow money. He got that shadow money that's hard to count. But Eric, I want to pass your thought, and I will get back into the Larry Ellison story. But do you have any feedback on that?
Well, I think having looked at this issue and tried to work it into my own history of the deep state that I present in my dissertation, American Exception, Empire in the Deep State, I don't examine the issue of Israel very much, but I talk about the ascendancy, the rise of the neocons a bit. But I stop at Ronald Reagan because that was a point at which a new sort of right-wing regime in the U.S. was more or less established, and it's been continued ever since. However, the one thing that has surprised me and is very weird to learn, and but there's more and more that I find to back this up, is that George H.W. Bush, who is an imperialist, who's a corporate, Wall Street capitalist to the bone, an oligarch from an oligarch family, he saw the peril, and I believe that Reagan did towards the end of his presidency. He saw the peril of Israel's influence in the United States, and that it was geared around this Greater Israel idea. And that it was because of their obsession with Greater Israel, it was incumbent upon them to control American politics as much as they could. and really manipulate it. And even if you go back to Kennedy, there's a section in the memoir of Dobrynin, who was a Soviet diplomat who knew Kennedy well, in his memoir. And he says, yeah, Kennedy told me that there were really two people that stood in the way, or two groups that stood in the way of better relations with the Soviet Union. One of them were just ideological Cold War hawks, so the right wing militarists and so on. And he says the other one was a certain ethnic group. And so Kennedy was kind of, delicate about it. But he took this to mean, pro-Israel, like Jewish people, but specifically Zionists, right? That they were
Yeah.
just dead set against any peace in the U.S. But that wasn't really the position of, any peace between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. But this hardcore Cold War position was not really the position of most American Jewish people. They were probably a little bit more on the liberal side and less hawkish side. It was really these oligarchs, and it has to do with Israel, I believe, that they needed the U.S. to have an aggressive posture towards the rest of the world because they could exert influence over the U.S. foreign policy apparatus. So, they played a role in the JFK assassination, but they had to have had the approval of probably the Pentagon and, some other elements of the U.S. regime that are not quite so visible. But you fast forward to to Reagan. The last thing that Reagan does in 1989, he's done in 1989. Like he basically goes just a month into 1989, and then Bush takes over. But he recognizes the PLO, which is something that the Zionists were freaking out about. Because if you recognize the PLO and you say, okay, they've renounced terrorism, we can negotiate with them, well, then you could negotiate a Palestinian state, which was the U.S. policy. But the Zionists never, ever, ever want that. Above all, they want Greater Israel. In May of 1989, the Secretary of State of the United States, James Baker, goes to AIPAC, as I understand it, and he tells these, 1,000 or so wealthy, influential Jewish Zionists, mostly Jewish Zionists, he says it's time to put aside once and for all the unrealistic idea of Greater Israel. Okay, and then H.W. Bush forces Israel to enter into negotiations with the Palestinians, or else he will withhold like billions of dollars in loan guarantees. So this got him the extreme hatred of the super Zionists, and I believe that they were probably behind having Ross Perot run that year. When you think about how the effect of it and
That's a
everything
crazy
else,
connection. That's wild.
I suspected that anyway because of the way that it all went down. Because Bush, if you look at American politics, incumbents have a big advantage. And George H.W. Bush had just basically won the Cold War, and he'd won the Gulf War in Iraq and Kuwait, right?
I gotta look into that. That's super
He should
interesting.
have been reelected. And one thing that I found, which doesn't prove my hypothesis here, but it's very damning, I thought, because it just was like I wasn't looking for this. I just found it. When Israel was stealing oil essentially from Kurdish areas in Iraq and Syria, and then they would ship it through Turkey and then to Israel. There was one American company doing business there, and it happened to be owned by Ross Perot Jr. So he got in on this like oil smuggling Zionist gravy train, in the 2000s. So I thought that was very, very weird. But the point is, H.W. Bush loses, and after that, the presidents, Clinton seems to be influenced. Well, I think the Lewinsky thing was an example of blackmail used against him for. I mean, it just seems to be, now that we think about it, it's an
Yeah.
Epstein kind of operation. And Epstein even had a picture of Bill Clinton in that Monica Lewinsky blue dress, like he had it hanging up in his apartment, and he was friends with Bill Clinton. So
Jeez.
make of that what you will. Very strange, but Clinton pardons Mark Rich, who's this Zionist guy who had the head of Mossad on speed dial, and was a criminal. And his lawyer also, Mark Rich's lawyer, was Scooter Libby, who was Dick Cheney's chief of staff under W. Bush. And what I understand from talking to a former oil executive who was a advisor for petroleum issues after the Iraq War, his name's Gary Vogler, he told me that he knows people in the oil industry who are friendly with the Bushes, and that H.W. Bush believed the reason he lost in 92 was because of Israel, and that W. Bush was not going to repeat that mistake. He was going to get a second term by giving Israel free reign to do whatever. And so, well, whatever we make of 9/11, that happens. and you have the Iraq War also, and basically a very pro ultra Zionist neocon foreign policy that his father was totally opposed to. Not that I'm a fan of George H.W. Bush, because I'm not, but he wasn't a
Of course.
lunatic like these people. These neocons and the super Zionist people are insane. They are just
They
lunatics.
have a
And
thousand ways to fuck with you. Like
yes,
Chuck Schumer said, they got if you don't bend to their law, they got a thousand ways to fuck with you. But
and he
this,
says the
you're spinning,
intelligence
Aaron.
community, but in general, this is what we're
Yeah,
talking about. People with lots of money and clandestine power.
yeah, very well said, Aaron. That I think that was a fantastic opener. I'm gonna show you guys just these two quick receipts, and I'm gonna quickly cover what's going on in Japan because it's extremely relevant to how the overall West is forming right now. They are fully embracing fascism. They are fully embracing militarism as a way to counter the rise of China, as a way to counter the global majority resisting Western U.S. hegemony. They're going all out, all full-fledged militarism, and that's essentially who Japan elected. But I'm going to quickly read these receipts on Larry Ellison. This is Larry Ellison's son David, who was colluding with top Israeli officials and foreign Israeli intelligence agencies to spy on Americans who supported Palestine. And this is very open. So this person who I like to refer to as a shadow president, because I think that's fun. I think it's funny to refer to him that way. Successfully, and this is the person who now owns CBS, was helping Israel spy on Americans. The people who supported the BDS movement, the people who shown up at protests, he directly facilitated this. And now he owns CBS, and he has the head editor at CBS is Barry Weiss. This is where I left off before we went down a little rabbit hole. And this is why I will always bring this up whenever people discuss Barry Weiss. It's how she directly acts as a kill agent for the Israeli regime. You have Rafayette in Gaza who was murdered, and this is his tweet he sent out because Barry Weiss was helping the IDF pinpoint his location. She doxed him and helped the Israeli government facilitate their program where they were executing journalists. And this is what he said before he was eventually killed by the state of Israel. If I get killed by Israeli bombs or my family is harmed, I blame Barry Weiss and her lights. Many maniacal Israeli soldiers already bombing Gaza take these lies smear seriously and act upon them. So Barry Weiss doxed this guy and got him murdered by the IDF, and now she's the person who is controlling CBS. I think it's pure panic because even a large amount of evangelical Christians are starting to turn on the Israeli project. And now this is reporting by my friend Sarah and DDG how there's this massive coordinated project by Israel to blast propaganda in conservative Christian communities because they are panicking over losing them. They knew that like Black Americans and young Americans, they was already losing them. The ADL said Black Americans one of the greatest threats to Israel, but losing your core base is what truly make them panic, and that's why they're engaged in this mass propaganda psyop campaign. Aaron, I want to get your thoughts on this before I switch topics. Is your thoughts on like there was polls that showed the majority of people, both in the Republican and Democrat Party, is calling for arms embargo of the state of
Yeah,
Israel.
right.
I'm gonna cover Japan, and Japan is just another example of how the populace being extremely anti-Israel, but they are ruled by a Zionist ruling class because they don't have a true democracy. We see the same in Italy, where there are general strikes, and Giorgia Meloni is a diehard Zionist, where they got to pretend and do these political theater, pretend that they're in support of Palestinians. Are you seeing the same thing with this massive shift in consciousness regarding Israel and Zionism?
I mean, honestly, the sort of elephant in the room here when you're talking about the shifting opinions of even conservative Americans is the Charlie Kirk assassination, which is so bizarre. And
Well, I can't wait to get your thoughts on this once you
I mean,
get
look,
part of
I think that it's so perfectly timed and so on, and the case against the guy is so bizarre. It doesn't seem like he could have been shot with the kind of round they were talking about, And then there's all these different pictures of him where he supposedly disassembled this gun like he was the Flash or something, like he could just move like a blur and do a job that takes like a minute, but do it in like 2 seconds. That seems very strange. And those texts, which are the most contrived things I've ever seen, like the most
Yeah.
ridiculous. It just seems
My
so
lover, here is my
clearly.
motive. Here is my motive that the prosecutor needs.
I
Here is my
mean,
text tying me to the gun, which the prosecutor needs.
yeah. And so people who,
I'm glad that you see this. I'm glad you see it the same way I do, because
well,
the whole story makes no damn sense to me, and I
yeah,
covered it a little bit as well. Please continue, Aaron.
I even thought that the way the security team around him reacted was bizarre, and they were
To me, that's a smoking gun.
unnaturally calm. And then they take down all the cameras, and then they put him in a instead of an ambulance, he gets taken in one of their cars, and we don't hear anything about the autopsy. But even that is going to be very suspect because it's going to
They
be the
faked the
state that
autopsy.
does it.
I don't know if you
I
remember this, Aaron,
I
but
haven't,
one
I
of the
haven't, I
doctors
haven't
said,
been following that aspect of it, but I knowing the
yeah,
JFK case, you just see how, oh yeah, you can fix anything. Anything can be fixed as in fixed by nefarious actors.
you guys realize they were getting sloppy. The establishment was getting sloppy because after the shooting, they immediately said Charlie Kirk told his family to pray for me. There was a headline that said Charlie Kirk told people as he in the hospital to pray for me. Then there was another report that said he died instantly. Then
Yeah,
there
he
was
seemed
one
to
there
die
was
pretty
one
quick.
report where the doctor said he got the bullet in an autopsy, and that's where the whole Charlie Kirk is the man of steel bullshit came from. They like his body stopped a 30-06 sniper rifle bullet, but then it was turned out they didn't do the autopsy yet.
Yeah,
So you guys, they was extremely sloppy. So did you do the autopsy or not? Then they're like, oh no, actually we did the autopsy later, before he was flown out by Air Force One or whatever JD Vance was it, Air Force Two? I think JD Vance is.
yeah.
He had his dead body carried by Air Force Two. So when did the autopsy take place? Anyway, I don't want to get down the rabbit hole again because I covered
Yeah,
it
it's the
before. Dude,
details are
nothing makes
crazy.
sense.
Right.
Nothing makes sense. I
But
saw this. I
people,
wasn't going to cover it, but I want to get your thoughts on this because I know you.
yeah. Well,
I want to get your thoughts on it. I saw this before we went live. I didn't plan a segment on it, but I want to get your thoughts
yeah.
because I've been leaving this to Candace and their friends because the people who like close to Charlie Kirk is like, nigga, I want to figure out what the hell happened to him. So they were trying to figure out the truth about what the hell happened to Charlie Kirk, which shows why Charlie Kirk and his friends, the people who viewed him as a mentor, the people who were closest to Charlie, they don't give a fuck about investigating this. And Aaron, you mentioned before that the crime scene, I think that was the number one smoking gun. That was what got me into it. When I saw the Charlie Kirk producer guy grab the mic and put it in his pocket, the way they was tampering with the crime scene and the federal agents and the police officers were allowing them to,
Yeah.
it's like, bro, come on, man. And
Yeah,
I just read
that was
it. Charlie,
strange.
I'll just read this. I didn't plan on covering it. I don't want to play the whole video.
I haven't seen this from. Does she actually have chat law? Like she has screenshots of Kirk saying this, or
Yeah, so Candace Owens shares a group chat with Josh Hammer, Rob McCoy, and 6 other TPA USA affiliates where Charlie Kirk explicitly said he had no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause just 48 hours before he was assassinated. So I had never like did a segment on this, but there's like this war going on in the right now. There are
yeah,
people who are making an argument that Charlie Kirk was leaving Israel, while the Laura Loomer Zionist people are making an argument that this is not the case, that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are spreading lies about Charlie Kirk leaving Israel. That's why there's a lot of confusion on the left about why Israel may have potentially murdered Charlie Kirk, because I've seen people say, why would they murder Charlie Kirk when he's pro-Israel? Well, the theory goes, I'm not saying I 100% believe it, but the theory goes, losing Charlie Kirk, who has this massive TPUSA Republican foundation where Republican candidates literally go through TPUSA. It's an oligarch-controlled
yeah.
media apparatus. They
Massive
couldn't lose him.
astroturf thing, but they astroturfed him
Yeah,
into like a legit idol for these people.
yeah, Aaron, and that's actually a very important point. Because me and Charlie Kirk is around the same age, and I have a long memory. I remember Charlie Kirk hitting the scene, guys. This teenager fuck. I don't know if you remember this, Aaron. I remember in the mid 2000s, this young babyface guy comes out of nowhere, and now he has all these billionaire. He has billionaire donors. You guys
Yeah.
think that's organic? I said it before, and we can move on because I don't want to beat a dead horse here. But Charlie Kirk, he partied with dangerous motherfuckers. He was partying and hanging around genocidal billionaires, and they play for keeps, fam. If you
they'll
cross
kill
them,
anybody, man. They'll kill anybody, and that. So I don't claim to have. I wouldn't go so far as to say like Israel did it, because
I'm not there.
We're talking about a sort of Zionist constituency that goes across borders. So it wouldn't who knows what the actual role of the Israeli state may or may not have been.
I hear you.
But the timing, it's interesting to hear people that are more conspiracy averse in some ways, like if they talk about 9/11 or other issues, like Larry Wilkerson, Larry Johnson, Max Blumenthal, and they're all really pointing out how suspicious this is. And then when you add it with the obsession with making sure that the American right stays on side as far as Zionism is concerned, and the purchase of TikTok, the turning CBS into a genocide advocacy network. I mean, these are really striking things, and I don't claim to know precisely what happened or who did it, but everything about it seems to have, I mean, the patsy element of it, the fact that the first story doesn't really add up and that things are kind of ridiculously and implausibly incriminating. It reminds me of these other cases of assassinations that are organized in this way. It just seems very, very timely and suspicious. Even the choice of the patsy. When they kill the Kennedy brothers, the patsies are first a communist, because of course capitalism is the best, and so communism must be evil. And then the second patsy was a Palestinian, the one that killed Robert Kennedy. And then now we have a a pro-trans person. And I really feel like the trans issue is something that has been ginned up into a sort of psychological operation to get people to argue about something to politicize something that's really more cultural and more about individualism than really a serious political issue, when you're talking about the fact that we live under a regime that's not a democracy, that's a lawless empire bent on global dominance, that, as I say, breaks the law constantly. And to the extent that politics are disputed, it's like only issues that the oligarchy allows to be disputed, like cultural issues like this, where it's like, it doesn't matter if you are anti-trans or pro-trans. The fact that you would think that that's an important issue to argue about or to get pissed off at people about, that's playing into the hands of this empire, and we don't live in a democracy anyway. So what are you thinking that this sort of cultural? I mean, I'm not from the coast. I know that the majority of people in the heartland of the U.S., the majority of the population, is not really super hardcore pro-trans or anti-trans. It's been ginned up in a particular way. And then the fact that this guy that the patsy was chosen this way is like the perfect way to like rile up conservatives and get them thinking about something besides, babies being starved to death and bombed with U.S. taxpayer dollars to no benefit of the United States. So even the right wing, the conservatives in the U.S., their moral compass is not so insane that they want to see a bunch of babies slaughtered. I mean, it's just not. And they have different political ideas of what is good and what is right, but there's really nobody that, except for these fanatics who want to see babies slaughtered for Lebensraum. I mean, this is a very disturbing project, and in the 21st century, it has brought down the U.S. empire. The Iraq War, the Afghan War was a disaster. The Syria, what we did in Syria is not good for U.S. foreign policy. All these sanctions that we've tried to put on everyone. The empire, because of these neocons, is actually circling the drain now, I believe.
Really well said. And as much as I want to spin off your amazing thoughts, because me and Aaron, we can go down these rabbit holes all day. But I'm going to get to the Japan story. If you guys haven't seen it, check out my hotspot brother, Nico. I did a great hotspot live with Nico and David Hadayan. Bro, look at these numbers that Nico put out. He put out these hotspot videos exploring the background of Erica Kirk and how they lied to you about everything. I didn't mean Kirk. Let me show you this. These videos that Nico House put out went crazy on YouTube. 248,000 views, 175,000 views. Very well-researched video. I'm like, bro, Erica Kirk, everything they told you about her and her background was lies. So make sure you got to check that out. Once you dive into the Erica Kirk rabbit hole and how she's being anointed, and there's like a possibility that Israel arranged that marriage in the first place. It's a very interesting story that we're going to be diving into for a very long time. I think it's like a new JFK. Like people are going to be piecing the puzzles on this for a very, very long time.